All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans, and countrymen, lend me your ear. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. We got, that's been love. That's just bad English. We have a very interesting show one more time. So, as soon as I find the right button, we are going to introduce the star of our show, and here he comes now. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Dude, the star of our show. As you can see, moving across the bottom of the screen, that is our call in number. So if you don't want to make a comment or you don't want to ask a question in here in the chat room, just feel free to call 302-497-3414. That is a number that you can call from anywhere in the world, and it won't cost you one penny. You can call from any device. That, in fact, is a Skype number, 302-497-3414. Call in, ask your question, and then we'll dismiss you, and so you can sit back and listen to the answer. I know I won't have it. Ed might have it. I'm sure that Robert will have it. So there's the call-in number, 302-497-3414. And thank you. Put the word out. Tell everybody that we are on the air right now, and we have a very interesting guest. In fact, how long ago was it, Robert, that we had you on? 3-4 weeks?
Yeah, a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago. By the way, you gentlemen got a lot of compliments on Dude in that introduction.
Yeah, dude, he's the guy that makes all these wheels turn around. Without Dude, we couldn't do this. So he's the more polished of us all around here. Ed, it's good to see you, buddy, out there in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I have graduated from sidekick to co-host.
Congratulations, Ed.
Why, thank you.
Yeah. And I suppose the sun's shining out where you're at too, huh, Ed?
It is, believe it or not. When you go to Florida, every day on the news, it'll say it's sunny and 95. Basically, that's when I used to live here. Everything was sunny, and in Columbus, or at least in Ohio, it's usually cloudy and whatever the temperature is, and it appears to be right now relatively sunny and I don't know, 80 some degrees.
Well, unfortunately, here in Delaware, it's overcast like it's been for I don't know how long. I'm beginning to know how Noah must have felt when he went on the ark. And I see Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday is rainy days. So the rainy man's going to hang around here. But nonetheless, we're here and we want people to be informed.
George, you got a banner for our topic?
I've got a banner.
All right.
I've got a banner. Do I have a banner?
You do.
As soon as I find out that I have a banner, I'm going to let you know that we have a banner.
All right. That's good.
Here is Robert's website, and I'm going to bring that up here in just a moment because we want to run this real quick video, set the stage for everything. But ladies and gentlemen, when we had Robert on the last time, several weeks ago, when he left the studio and we shut down, I just could not get this thing off my mind. And I wrestled with it. I mean, it was, I get involved in doing something and it just kept coming back. I I usually sleep pretty sound. I sleep fast, but I sleep sound. Uh, that night I didn't sleep sound. It just kept coming back, coming back, coming back. So I called Robert. I think it was the next day or several days after that, and asked him, "Would you come back on? Let's drill down into this thing uh, because there's people out there that's facing the same dilemma that you went through, and let's talk about all the spider webs that come forth from this thing that affects people." And he agreed, graciously agreed. And we've stayed in touch over the weeks by the way of telephone, and we've chatted about this and chatted about this. So that's what brought this part 2 here today. Let me go up here real quick and share this screen with us so you can see it. Some of you saw it last time. This will be the first time for some others.
Robert Lindemann. This is the Lindemann Theory, a 31-year journey, and my cure. It was a tree similar to this one that I climbed the winter of 2005 to end my life. The only thing that saved me that night was that I ran out of branches on the ascent. The event was part of a 31-year journey of illness that began as a severe case of OCD at age 15. I theorized in 2009, yes, 31 years later, while running along a trail similar to this one, that the medications I was taking for the OCD were creating other symptoms, a misdiagnosis which caused continual disruptions to my life and career. Those disruptions would eventually force me to leave medical school in 1997 after completing the first 2 years in very good standing. My theory has been validated by 8+ years, yes, almost a decade now, of symptom-free, long-term psychotropic medication and long-term therapy-free. By substituting Infinity E IQ, a combination of community, stimulation, and clean fuel, I provide the science to validate my theory. My wife and kids are part of my community, along with friends, faith, and you, my fellow man. This is part of clean fuel, and along with physical, mental exercise, and stimulation, provide the bio and neurochemical alterations to bring evolution to the fore. I have written this book, The Lindemann Theory, a 31-year journey and my cure for you. I want to share my epiphany, my retrospective analysis of my case history, the science behind my theory, and this remarkable story. There's a story of grit, determination, love, family, empathy, and a desire to fulfill goals and help others, and to prevent others from ever enduring the same hardships that I did. I bear all in this book and speak from the heart. I thank you so much for your valuable time, and I hope you find my words to enlighten. And remember, there is nothing, absolutely nothing wrong, but everything right with hope. Happy holidays 2017, and Happy New Year for every year to come. I'm finally free, and I hope you are too.
Robert, I asked you before on the last show, but I'll ask you again. Although you did that 3 years ago, still has a powerful impact on you personally, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I think the beautiful thing about the story is it's now 11.5 years. It's a cure. You'll notice that on the website behind me and on the 2 books that I've written, one for the general public, for the world, and one for the professional, I don't put quotes around the word cure because the ideas and the theories in the book are based on a very strong scientific foundation of clean fuel, some supplements, and mental, physical exercise, and the concept of community, and how positive stress can replace medications. So it's been 11.5 years, 0 symptoms, and I hope that helps all of you out there. I know that 1 out of every 4 people worldwide, individuals worldwide, will suffer at some time in their life from some sort of psychiatric mental illness. That's a huge number. And I think the book's got major relevance, and the ideas have major relevance for today and within the anxiety, depression that's going on within this COVID-19 pandemic. Let me just preface before I go further with you, Ed and George. Let me thank you again for having me on, and once again, let me preface the whole conversation with, I have to put a disclaimer out there that I'm not a medical doctor, although I have a very extensive background. My 2 degrees from Rutgers University in biology and psychology and medical school, and that covered all physiological parameters, pharmacology, exercise physiology, and many courses to back my theories. And I first entered a medical school library at age 17, actually, while I had the illness. So thank you so much for having me back, both of you. And just a pleasure.
We're glad you could be on, for sure.
While you're along those lines, Robert, you mentioned last show, or after the last show, that many people, even some people close to you, never realized that you had OCD.
Yes, correct. That's what I'm finding out, and it's been a little difficult on that end. I still haven't had some very difficult conversations that I need to have with family members about that. And one thing that came out of this whole thing is I was fairly bewildered, and yes, that was a little bit confusing when I came out of it. It seems like my father, which passed away, I guess it's now been about 10 years, 11 years ago, pretty much kept things secret. He did confide in one minister, and that minister who read the book and commented on the book did not know even close to the full extent of what was going on or what happened during those 31 years. So, yeah, I was amazed at that. And again, I still have to have some difficult conversations with some people.
Ed?
Yeah, I was going to say, just so people understand that that OCD is not as uncommon as they might think or admit. Can you throw that video up there, George, and have a chance for a little bit of analysis of that? Okay, I guess that's where I need to play it. Okay, hold on. There you go.
It can be obsessive thoughts and repetitive behaviors. Children with obsessive compulsive disorder can be diagnosed as young as 6 years old.
OCD is a disorder that is comprised of obsessions and compulsions. It's probably about 2% of the population in children, and that may be an underestimate because people don't always like to talk about it.
Child psychiatrist Dr. Denise Duchik says the obsessions can interfere with the child's concentration.
When it starts interfering with their ability to engage in their usual activities, school, going out to play, engaging in family activities, because they have to do their compulsive behaviors and repetitive rituals, then that's probably the time to bring them in.
OCD is a hereditary disorder that can often link to other problems like ADHD, Tourette's, even depression.
Some of the compulsive behaviors might be the need for symmetry, having things just lined up just so, or in an even fashion.
The disorder can be lifelong, but with treatment, some children can outgrow it.
Yes, it can be treated quite well. We have psychotherapies that will be helpful. Sometimes the cognitive behavioral psychotherapy will help.
Doctors may also recommend medication. If a child starts a treatment, it's important the treatment is consistent at home and at school. For Lee Health, I'm Lindsay Fry.
Very interesting.
Perhaps if I might I enter that child's mind and try to help you with what's going on with that individual?
Yes. Yes.
He's at the sink because he's going to wash his hands. He wants the thought process to go away. There is something that's telling this individual that if I wash my hands, the thought process that is driving him to wash his hands is going to stop. He possibly might thinking that he's going to spread the germs to his sister or mother or parents and kill the family, and or he's going to bring it to school and he's going to hurt people. So he goes to the sink to wash his hands to get rid of the germs, but he's really trying to get rid of the thought process, which he can no longer stop. That is the fundamental thing that I wanted to bring to people's attention with this disorder. And that is the compulsion is a desire to get the thought process to stop. I also wanted to let people know that in the book, I describe a component of this disorder, which is fear. And the fear is that child knows he can no longer control his thought process. Now, that in itself, that fear in itself will perpetuate the illness. Now, in all due respect to, well, I certainly, you've heard Dr. Juchek say that it's hereditary. You heard her say that it can be responsive to cognitive, other therapies, medications. For me, just for clarify, and I certainly can't draw, it's dangerous to draw broad parallels. But cognitive therapies, other therapies, psychotherapy had absolutely zero effect for me, zero benefit. I was not, certainly for me personally, there was no symmetry involved. There was no desire. I propose in my book that my own illness, and I certainly would like to extrapolate it to other people. She mentioned it 2%, 1 in 50 individuals. And certainly I believe that I am not unique. So I think my ideas are broad. I believe that I got involved in a brain lock. I don't know the hereditary components behind this. There's hereditary is based on genetics and environment. Many genetic diseases don't get brought out until their environment changes, and that cuts across a ton of diseases. So I don't want the individuals out there, obviously I don't want the individuals out there that have OCD to think that they are stuck with this for the rest of their lives. Why? Because for 11 and a half years, I have had zero symptoms. Okay. Now, in that child's brain, there is fear, there is pain. Okay. It is extremely painful to have to be driven to that sink to drive your hands over and over again. The anxiety is off the chart. Okay. Depression has not set in yet, probably because he's young, but it will start to build because the fear and the pain grows. So the clinician needs to understand that as well. So you've got 3 components. You've got the obsessions, you've got compulsions, which are a manifestation of the obsessions. Your goal is to get rid of the obsessions. And for me, medications were the answer. But in the case history that I describe, you'll notice a ton of other things that went on that led me to my theories. It showed that on my entrance to Chapel Hill, North Carolina to play baseball, an environment change in the environment completely evaporated the symptoms, disappeared for 5 weeks. My interest in clean fuel program and supplements of docosahexaenoic and icosapentaenoic acid, and my ideas behind mental, physical, and exercise, all backed by tremendous biochemistry changes. For me, that replaced the medication. And again, it has been 11 and a half years. So for me, I don't think I don't think I'm unique. And I think my theories are applicable to these patients, and I need to figure out a way to get it to them as well. And in the book, I document 4 medications, one a combination of medications that took away all of the symptoms. So for those medications and for those people out there that have OCD, it was an all or none effect. I went from, when the medications worked, I went from, and these are a scale of 0 to 10, I went from a mental pain level of 15, and off the chart anxiety, to complete removal of symptoms. And many of those drugs acted on the dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonergic systems. So those are my commentaries on that video. It's a beautiful video. There's hope for these people, and I hope my theories have broad application to them.
Ed?
Yeah, I thought that was really good. George, if you don't mind, I'd like to flick on another video here.
All righty.
Let's take a look here.
There we is.
All right, we is getting ready to push play.
Double checking things is a pretty common human behavior. Like, did I shut the garage door? Better double check. How about locking the front door? Double check. Gas stove and oven off? Double check. We all do it, but what if you feel compelled to triple check it, or even quadruple check it, or quintuple check it even? Then it might be considered an obsession. Now, what if you have to do a certain ritual with the gas stove and oven before leaving the home each time? Like, make sure the gas stove is off, wipe down the gas stove to clean it, double check that the burners are off, make sure the oven's off, wipe down the oven to clean it, and then open the oven door to make sure no heat's coming out, and then you can leave the house. Then that might be a compulsion. Obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, is a specific type of anxiety disorder characterized by these obsessions or compulsions. Obsessions are recurrent and intrusive thoughts that are typically unwanted and tough to get out of your brain. These unwanted thoughts, like my house is unsafe, cause anxiety, and usually they lead to compulsions, which are actions that might be performed to try and reduce the anxiety associated with obsessions. As you might imagine, these thoughts and rituals can have a serious impact on someone's daily life. OCD affects around 3% of the population, and affects both men and women equally, and usually starts in childhood or in the teen years. Celebrities like David Beckham and Howie Mandel are known to be affected by OCD, and a more severe example is that of Howard Hughes, business tycoon and entrepreneur, among other things, who was affected by a relatively incapacitating OCD later in his life. Although obsessive-compulsive includes both obsessions and compulsions, one doesn't need both obsessions and compulsions for a diagnosis. Some individuals might have just obsessions or just compulsions, but the majority of patients have both, often where the compulsion is performed to alleviate an obsession. A very common compulsion is cleaning, which often stems from an obsession with germs or contamination. Another common compulsion is checking, usually because they have obsessions that something's unsafe, so they'll check to make sure that something's definitely safe by unlocking and relocking it, sometimes several times. More generally, though, repeating is a compulsion on its own, where an action or phrase is repeated several times. And usually this is done because if it's not, they think something bad will happen. Sometimes patients might feel compelled to order or arrange things, because when they're out of order, it causes anxiety and discomfort. Finally, mental rituals are also obsessions. These are often done to try to neutralize intrusive or what they think are bad thoughts. So they might try and call up specific words or phrases they think are good thoughts to try and replace the bad thoughts. Now, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, the 5th edition, or the DSM-5, gives specific diagnostic criteria to meet for a diagnosis of OCD. First and foremost, they need to have the presence of obsessions, compulsions, or both. Makes sense. The obsessions and/or compulsions need to also be time-consuming, often such that it produces distress with their social life and their work. For example, taking 2 hours every day folding and unfolding clothes and then being late for work. It's also important that the obsessions and compulsions are not due to the physiological effects of a substance or other medical condition. Finally, the apparent anxiety isn't better explained by another mental disorder, like, for example, an obsession with personal appearance, like in dysmorphic disorder. Like most mental disorders, there isn't a known cause of OCD, though it's thought to be a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Sometimes OCD seems to run in families, and an important clue is that identical twins are more often affected than non-identical twins. It's now thought that abnormalities in serotonin neurotransmission in the brain plays a key role, though the exact mechanism is unknown. Treatment usually involves psychotherapy, medications, or both. Among psychotherapy options, cognitive behavior therapy has been effective, specifically a technique called exposure and response therapy, where patients are first exposed to the anxiety and compulsion-provoking situation, ultimately showing that the anxiety actually lessens when the compulsion is not carried out. Because the cause has been linked to serotonin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, have been shown to be an effective drug treatment, though they often come with symptoms and side effects that may need further treatment with medications or psychotherapy. With the right treatment, though, patients often return to normal daily life and activity.
All right, so that was what I wanted to hit there. But so there's a couple things there, George, that I thought you might want to talk about. One was this data says 3% now, so we went from 2% to 3%, and then also the reliance on psychotropic drugs and things like that. So what do you think about that, Robert?
I think let's start off with the idea of the compulsions in the DSM-5, denoting the significance of having both obsessions and compulsions. And again, let me reiterate that the patient, they talk about the patient needs to. For you out there, let me make something perfectly clear. When that child, young man goes to the sink and washes his hands, he knows, and this is going to be difficult for you to understand, but he knows that his thought process is erroneous. He just can't stop it. When the young lady goes to clean the stove, turn the gas knobs off, she knows, she knows that it is an erroneous thought process. So let me correct that right away. And that is part of the pain for the individual. The individual knows that the absurdity of the obsession, and that is principally what drives the anxiety off the wall. I mean, if you think about it, say George is doing this show and he's worried that he left the gas knobs on the show, and he's in another world because he's worried about the gas knobs. Obviously his concentration is going to be off. As for the compulsion as being a necessity, in the last show I described a simple example of where that's not necessarily true. I spent days perusing in my brain the jingle from the Sara Lee company, "Nobody Doesn't Like Sara Lee." No compulsion there except an internal one. So again, in my thought process, that's not necessarily the truth. You don't necessarily need the compulsion unless you consider that return to the thought process a compulsion in itself. You following me?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you don't have to have a gas knob to check. You don't have to have you don't have to wash your hands. It can be totally internalized. I will tell the clinician and others out there, if you see the individual shaking their head, that after I was exposed to OCD for about 2 or 3 years, I actually started to shake my head to get rid of the thoughts. That should be watched for. And I wrote this book for one reason, and I didn't want people to go through what I went through, so I'm not going to pull any punches with psychotherapists and psychiatrists. Okay? If you have, and I'm going to be forthright because it scares me, there are medications out there, okay, that treat OCD and can get rid of it. If you have a patient who is not responding to the available non-medicated treatments out there, as a therapist, please understand that these individuals are in agony. And while it took me 3 or 4 years, how I withstood it for 4 years, I do not know. I don't want, and the end result was an attempted suicide. I want the clinician to understand the pain that these people are suffering, and if their therapies are not working on a cognitive level, on a psychotherapy level, on an exposure response level, please corroborate with a psychiatrist or an MD to get them medication while you're doing this. Most of these medications in themselves take 4 to 6 weeks. So I just want to put that out there. Yes, I know I'm not an MD, people, but I'm not an MD because they won't let me back into medical school to take a simple test. Okay, and that's very frustrating considering I spent 16 years at Rutgers in medical school getting through this. All right, and it's also frustrating that they wouldn't take the time to sit down with me and listen to me. But beside that, I have 31 years of real life experience. Okay, it's been 11 and a half years with absolutely no symptoms. All right, and obviously there's no anxiety associated with that. And the last thing I want to bring, and Ed, thank you so much for bringing those videos onto the show.
Mm-hmm.
The anxiolytic component of the OCD is inherent in the fact that the thought doesn't stop. So I to the MD, to the psychiatrist, if you do prescribe medications, please don't bring in anxiolytics and to reduce the anxiety, because it's not going to work. The obsessions create the anxiety, and that will only confound the biochemistry and the neurochemistry by bringing in another medication. All right, and I believe that to be true. All right, we've got a complicated system. We've got over 200 neurotransmitters. We've got over 50 endocrine hormones. We've got autocrine and paracrine hormones. Our body is full of hormones. It's a balance that began in subtropical Africa 5 million years ago. It's been developing, and the science behind the manipulation of the neuro and physiological chemistry inherent in the clean fuel and the supplement components, and the exercise physiology is major. I just right before the show, I just perused an article out of Harvard by a Dr. Sahay, who simply verifies new neuronal growth is possible with exercise. I mean, it's a, I was going to say it's a no-brainer, but that's what happens. You can bring in exercise, intense exercise meditation can allow your body to secrete brain-derived neurotropic factor, and in combination with the docosahexaenoic acid, you can sprout new dendrites, and the magnificent things in the body can occur. And again, we stressed that in the beginning of the show. It's not in the beginning of the show. We stressed that in the last show, the fine balance of the body, and many medications lack specificity. All right, and again, I believe my Infinity EIQ can replace those medications, and I'm not gonna. I don't want to pull any punches anymore. I wrote this book for one reason. I don't want people to go through what I went through. I'm drinking water right now because I have lithium-induced nephrogenic diabetes insipidus, and it was heartbreaking for me when I wrote the book to read a research article and find out after 3 weeks of giving lithium to mammals, they suffered kidney damage. That blew me away. I'm taking it for 10 years, and you wonder why I've got to drink water. All right. Now, while the kidney damage is permanent, it's not progressing, thank God. And but I don't want others to have to do that, and I don't want others to have to go through 12 or 15 burnouts at a time, and then possibly realize after 31 years that people thought they were a quitter. And
so if let's say the data is right, that the videos we just watched, that 3% of the population has the disorder. What's the danger of having the disorder, and is it something people can live with, or do they have to get it treated? How does it work?
Well, apparently, I believe there's. I see. It's very difficult for me to. I had an interesting conversation with someone, and there may be less severe variants. Certainly, it would be a beautiful topic to talk with Mr. Mandel and Mr. Beckham. We know Howard Hughes had an off-the-chart one like I did. And it'd be interesting to know why some people have a more intense version of another. I mentioned in the book about type A personalities, but I believe the type A personality is inherent in the disorder. And I also question the hereditary component of this. There's other things involved as well. A lot of, in terms of environment, changing your environment, it's very easy to do with my theories and eliminating the induction of cortisol. By eating lousy, you can bring in cortisol. And when you go through a depression, you actually can decrease the hippocampal growth by 10%. George and Ed, hippocampus is involved with long-term memory, learning and memory. So where you can exercise and increase hippocampal growth, if you undergo a depression, you can decrease hippocampal growth by 10%. Now, if that shows up on a CAT scan, then they might conclude that the OCD patient has a physiological disorder, inherent and hereditary. So I certainly would have loved to see my brain while I had OCD in a CAT scan, PET scan, and then after. So I think the thing to do would be have a little chat with Mr. Mandel and Mr. Beckham and say, you know, are there symptoms? Are they in and out? Do they come and go? Are they, in the first session, George and Ed, I mentioned the component of pain, and the DSMV should have that in there. The patient, if they have, I don't care about the compulsions. If there's pain involved in that thought process, they have OCD. If the person cannot stop a thought process outside of a conflict, okay? I mean, if George won the lottery today and he had spent weeks determining whether he was going to live a life of luxury or keep doing the George Espinlab show, and that was driving George crazy, that's not obsessive compulsive disorder. That's just a decision. You following me? George, would that be a tough decision?
That would be a tough decision. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, even in the video, the video shows it went through a list. It said, you know, if you go through all these steps every time you leave, that's a sign of OCD. And I was thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. If I'm getting ready to leave, I'm going to be checking to make sure I've unplugged everything and, you know, made sure everything's turned off. If I use the oven or the Foreman grill that doesn't turn itself off, and, you know, and so on and so forth. So I think that part of the variance in the 2% or 3% of the population having it might have something to do with being way too easy to diagnose.
Well, yeah, and in the first video, George, Ed, I explained that I drove 20 minutes down the road and had to come back and check the gas knobs, then had to drive another 20 minutes down the road and again came back. So, and you know that, and you and George know that the terms OCD is used routinely. In the last show, I made the mistake of using ADHD. I very cavalier. I lost my train of thought, and I said, oh, "Look at this! I'm getting a case of," and that's the danger. So, I can't comment on those statistics, Ed. I do know some things from my own case. The mental pain was off the charts severe, and I do know that some therapies didn't work. I do know the medications work, and I do know that the science behind my Infinity EIQ, the triad of community, and clean fuel, and the exercise, mental and physical, it can replace it. I know that because it's been 11 and a half years with no symptoms. So now there was one other thing, Ed, you mentioned that I wanted to address in that video, but I'm not going to use that term ADHD. I just lost it for temporarily. But I don't know if it's too. The clinician simply asked, John, Jane, are you in pain? Is your brain? Are you in pain? So I you know, it's beyond organization. You can be organized and not have OCD. There's nothing wrong with being organized. Ed mentions he checks everything too. It's the problem when you have to drive down 20 minutes down the road. You have to come back, check it again, drive back and come back. So does that clarify anything? Or
yeah, that's a big difference.
Robert.
Yes.
For those that didn't know, but you went to an eye doctor when you was what, 15 years old or something like that?
I think it was, let's see, I was a freshman. I was actually 16, I think, 16.
16 years old,
16.
And mom took you to the eye doctor, and he told you that, well, I'll let you tell the story.
The origin was I simply didn't have 20/20 vision, and it just began from there. It was either a preoccupation. It could have had a slight phobic response. It's a major sense. The fear of losing your sight. It could be like it certainly could have been equivalent to someone who is afraid of going up ladders. I had a certain little bit of fear. It could have been a vanity, the possibility of having to wear glasses. Contacts weren't available at that time. It's irrelevant because once it was set, it couldn't go away. And I described that one of the major components of that, I believe, was the fact that as soon as I was not able to get rid of the thought, a tremendous amount of fear rushed in. And I think that perpetuated it. And I think that's important. I think for the therapists out there, talk to the patient about that fear component. And I believe, I'm almost convinced that that fear component is what perpetuates anxiety disorders and panic attacks. You'll notice that if an individual has one panic attack, he's prone to have another. Why? Well, once they get to that state of inducing and undergoing a panic attack, they start to realize, oh my God, I'm going to have a panic attack. Now, if it happens again, high anxiety, they start to relive that, and that fear perpetuates that. Now, how do I know that? Because I dealt with similar things during the 31 years, so I understand how fear works in conjunction with the disorders. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. 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 The spider web, OCD, all these things. My question to you would be: the fear, the anxiety. How did you? And people didn't realize that you had OCD. How on the inside you must have been like a raging volcano.
Well, yes, the high school, I actually one morning woke up and almost quit high school. The first video was instrumental. It's almost impossible to concentrate. You're having conversations with people, and 90% of your brain is trying to figure out the jingle, nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee. Right? I was fortuitous enough to win Athlete of the Year at high school, and I'm up there and I'm thinking about, I'm in another world. And it's heartbreaking. You're supposed to be happy, and you're in pain and your agony, and it was an extremely difficult time. I think what enabled me to get through was those things were already in motion. I was already in Boy Scouts on my way to get an Eagle Scout. I was already involved with baseball and had the talent to keep continuing. So if it started at an earlier age, that would be really difficult. Does that make any sense to you? Yeah. Things were kind of in motion, and it just collapsed when I got out to Chapel Hill and the symptoms disappeared. I was euphoric, and then they returned, and when they returned, that's when I finally was like, that's kind of when I just said, wow, I can't do it anymore. So it did take a good 3.5 years before that happened. So it's debilitating. It's very difficult to concentrate. And but again, for those people out there, all I can say is it's 11.5 years. I've got the scientific research in the book to back it, and I can drill down to hundreds of thousands of other articles if I needed to, if you're following me.
Mm-hmm. Ed, you got another one to bring up?
Yep.
Take it away.
I just wanted to see what you guys thought about this. Does this sound about right? The trigger, intrusive thought, and so on. Does this chart make any sense to you?
Yeah, you can certainly there's no need to even you can combine 2, 3, and 4 right together. It hits rapidly. Intrusive thought, catastrophic obsession. It's can put parentheses and line them up along the line. The distress and anxiety is off the chart, and yet the compulsion comes, and then it starts over again. And for me, it was never ending. The only reason one obsession left was because another took its place.
Mm.
And it even invaded the sleep, which that probably helped maintain it in the brain lock as well. I described in the first session that the anxiety was the cortisol probably produced from the anxiety directly destroyed hippocampal neurons. The fact that it intruded in your sleep certainly would indicate that it's very difficult to enter deep sleep, which means that your brain is not going to remyelinate, which leaves you in the morning already vulnerable. So there's a number of things that maintain you in that brain lock. And I believe it's possible that if the brain lock is broken, and my infinity EIQ is substituted for some people, the medications can be taken away, and you can eliminate the things that can happen after that. So I don't think I'm unique. If I'm a member of the OCD community, of those 2 to 3%, now we have a 3%. I certainly believe that my book has applications across the world. And again, I know it has applications for anxiety disorders, depression. And can I ask a simple question? Is there any harm for the human beings on Earth to optimize their bio and neurochemistry? Is there any harm in that? So, no. But
And so are people saying that? Is the medical profession saying that there is a cure, not a cure, or you just manage it?
that's an interesting question. I'm waiting to I have the original psychologist I saw at age 16 has reviewed my book. He has offered to get it into a medical journal, submit it to a psychiatric medical journal. Right now, I'm waiting for an MD to confirm some of the bio and neurochemistry. I've had an attorney draw up a disclaimer, which if they write their opinion, they are not bound in any way. And I'm waiting for an MD to corroborate the science. Please keep in mind that I had the same core science background as any medical doctor out there. So it's frustrating for me to have that happen, but that's what I'm dealing with right now. So I don't know. I'm waiting to hear, Ed. And but from my point of view, I don't think that I think the thing to do is to have a conversation with some of these people that have a less severe variant. We've got a Howard Hughes, which seems to be my variant where I was at. And we have a Beckham and Mandel who have a lesser variant, and certainly would be wonderful to have a conversation with them and know if theirs comes and goes, and how that works.
Okay, George, if you don't mind,
For Beckham, for an elite athlete, one interesting thing is, one interesting idea is for an elite athlete, it is possible for elite athletes to have excessive cortisol production because of the intensity of their exercise. Now, I don't know how. It might be more applicable to triathletes. Beckham is involved in soccer, which is a rigorous game, but it's it depends on his off training. But it's possible that he was involved in overproducing cortisol, and again, cortisol kills hippocampal neurons, and it may have time left him vulnerable to returning symptoms. So that's certainly an idea. I believe Beckham's retired now, so be interesting to know if he's managing that OCD better, or it could be the opposite. He enjoyed the physiological and neurochemical effects of the exercise, but that's wonderful because he can go back to exercising and gain it. So I think it's time to have a conversation with some of these people who have a less severe variant and see how it goes for them.
Hey, pull this up, George. Thanks. So what do you think about this? So one thing I understand about math is a counterexample is a way to disprove something. This says, what are the treatments? This is from WebMD. I go here a lot. It says OCD doesn't go away on its own. It has no cure. You can't ignore it or think your way out of it, and so on. And so, and then it goes into some other things. So,
isn't that scary?
Yeah. Well, if it says there's no cure and you're sitting here 11 years cured, what would you have to say to that?
I think it's wonderful because I'm starting to realize one of the things that I learned when I did cure myself is I've learned what's going on. Again, I have no quotes on my cure. I'm smiling and laughing because I feel great. It's been 11 and a half years, and I've reached the point where I don't really care what other people think. I'm gonna keep spreading the word because that's what I have to do. It's inherent to me. I, I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. The science is behind it. You can, I can put research article in front of you that describes.
Is what you have as your solution? Is it?
For me, it's a cure.
No, I mean, is there any danger in somebody trying to use it?
Oh yeah, I started the conversation right off from the beginning with a disclaimer saying I'm not an MD. You want to do this under a medical doctor's supervision. You won't want to do this without a medical doctor's supervision. You don't want to get off medications without a doctor's supervision. I'm not encouraging people to get off medications.
No, let's just say that someone hasn't started on medications. They just
Right.
recently found out or recently realized that they have OCD, and is what you have to offer going to represent any danger to them?
That's the question that I bring that in the book. I talk about that in the book. It is my belief that once you're in, again, now this depends on the severity, Ed, but for my own case, I do not believe, without medications, I do not believe that the introduction of my Infinity EIQ alone would have been enough to get me out of the brain block. Okay. Once I was out of it via medications, then I believe the medication substituted could work. Now, does that mean that it would not work for somebody else? I believe that I believe that the precursor to OCD is an individual that does worry a lot. So, Ed, if I were to have at age 0 through 15 been on the Infinity EIQ program, would OCD have ever started? I don't think so. Does that help? So I believe that I believe we have a wonderful situation here. We have a set of principles that can help people, can help stop the onset of psychiatric diseases. We have some medications that can get rid of it, and we have cognitive psychotherapy that can help other people as well. So we've got a block, a conglomerate of solutions, and my only suggestion is for the individual who has severe OCD and to the therapist, please be careful with them and not go on too long with an unsuccessful attempts at getting them better, because depression and suicide are around the corner. That's just what I feel like.
What about loneliness? Did you experience loneliness?
Yeah, that is the community aspect of the triad is all over that. I described it when some major healthcare changes occurred at the psychiatric hospital that I had visited, and major cutbacks were made, probably because the psychiatric facility had a pool and had a nice yard, and it got tagged the name Country Club. Can you imagine that? They got a pool. They dug a 30,000 gallon hole, filled it with water, and they made their grass look nice. And it went from a psychiatric facility to a country club. And it's nauseating to think that led to cutbacks, possibly led to cutbacks. And when I went back, things were not as was not the community that it was. So that there's your loneliness, George. So yes, loneliness is a huge component of this. If you have mental illness, just find people, get a pet, get a dog, get a cat, and find, if you're unemployed, just find any job to keep busy and to be around people. With the COVID-19 thing, walk around, social distance, just keep your 6 feet away and just walk around town. One of the most isolating periods of my life is when I left medical school, and I was stuck in an apartment in Chicago, walking the streets of Chicago. After having studied for 16 years, and it was an absolute, it was lonely. So yeah, that is the major component of community, and that does happen with mental illness. So get with your family members, find friends, and if you are struggling with mental illness, I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult to get out of bed, but try to force yourself to talk to people, get out there, and don't be afraid. Please ask for help if you need it.
Very well said. Ladies and gentlemen, whether it's OCD or this, that, those, these, whatevers, if you're going through that mental anguish, and our culture, our society, we put a stigma to it. We turn up one eye, we give them funny looks. We keep our distance. We back up from people. Come on. We've all got quirks. I'm going to tell you something. We all got a few problems, and it's just that you just don't realize it, or you don't want to realize it. But there are people out here that we come in contact, and I perhaps said this last show, we come in contact with them every single day. Be careful how you treat people. You don't know what's going on up here. You have no clue. Loneliness can be in a crowd and be the loneliest person in the world. And that leads to too many things. So listen, for those that don't have these disorders or these problems, make yourself friendly. Help somebody. I've always said it when we close out every show. Be kind to one another, love one another, take care of one another, and don't ever, ever, ever be afraid to tell someone, I love you. It could possibly save a life. Robert?
Thank you, George. Thank you, Ed. I know this was a little more intense and serious than our last, but you hit on some vague, some nerves. And folks, the website's behind me. Right now, we've got a 30% discount coupon code. Just type in relax. The book is in 2 versions. One's for the world, one's for the professional. I urge you to read it. I believe it's a guide to health and joy and peace and love. I won't put quotes around the word cure. WebMD needs to change that. And I think we're going to get the word out. I think we're going to go. And I thank you too. From the bottom of my heart, my family, my wife Roseanne, my kids, 7 and 9-year-old, thank you, and my family thanks you for doing this for me. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
Get the word out.
It's so important. And if we face these issues, don't run from these things. Don't run from them. Look them dead in the eye and say, what can I do? What can I do to help? What can I do to change it? I'm not a medical doctor by no stretch of the imagination, but I want to do something to help people that's facing these kind of problems each and every single day. That loneliness will tear you up, Jack. I'm telling you, it'll tear you up. And so, Robert, thank you so very, very much. We're going to stay in touch. I think there's more to come. Ed, final word, buddy.
Hey, no, I think we did a good job of educating the public, and check out the Lindemann Theory, because guess what? He has a counterexample that clearly the scientific community has not accepted yet, that maybe they need to look into.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans, and countrymen, thank you for taking the time, whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, or somewhere around this great big world. I trust and pray that you'll be kind to one another, love one another, help one another, and please, don't ever be afraid. I already said it. Don't ever be afraid to look somebody dead in the eye and from the heart, tell them, I love you. You could save a life. I pray that God will keep you right in the center of his hand. Tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, we will be having Matthew Morris here from Delaware, who is running for Congress. He'll be with us tomorrow night. We'll put more up on the site so you can get an eyeball on that. So until next time, you guys stay safe, and thank you for tuning in. See you, everybody.